Welcome to another webinar here at Body Track. My name is Michael DiBiase. I am a sports dietitian, registered dietitian, certified strength conditioning coach, and every month we're bringing you a new webinar on nutrition, performance, health, and wellness. I know some of you are going to be doing that 90-day challenge, so good luck to all of you that are doing it, and hopefully some of this information that we'll be talking about today will benefit you in your challenge and maybe even surpass some of your own goals that you have set for yourself, and hopefully maybe lead you to that victory and that beautiful briefcase of money. So let's get started. Today we're going to be talking about the diets, the best ones out there, if there really is a best one, and talking about caloric intake and how we can best manage both appropriately and based on exactly what it is our goals are and what it is that we want to accomplish in the short term and the long term. So if we look up dieting in Google, you're going to get it pretty easy definition, which is essentially restricting oneself to small amounts or a specific kind of food in order to lose weight. And that's the essential basic definition of dieting, and that's the one that we use as most appropriate. Now, dieting, of course, doesn't mean just to lose weight. There are people that diet to gain specific weight for specific times, to maybe just change their food habits and food intake. So diet isn't necessarily always associated with weight loss, but we're going to use it today in this term for that specific reason. We all diet. That is the absolute truth. No matter how we think about it, we're all on our own personalized diet. No two diets are alike. 7 to 8 billion people on Earth. There are 7 to 8 billion diets out there, and probably an infinite more. And we all have our own ways of eating, our own timing of eating. And so that makes each one of us unique. But that also means each one of us is potentially right in some of our own cases and how we eat, and potentially misled in what we think is the true way of eating. And it's important that we all get the evidence based on a lot of research and based on evidence-based practices so we can make the best decision for ourselves. In 2011, a Gallup poll conducted on to lose weight, Americans rely more on dieting than exercise. So if you can go actually to gallup.com and look up this poll, you'll see that Americans succeeding at losing weight, about 52% of adults, so we're only talking about half, they were more likely to mention various dietary changes than actually exercising or different types of movement patterns that seem to be more effective at weight loss. But exercising with 31% and eating less, 23% specifically, led the individual responses. So, it is fair to say that dieting seems to be the easier route for some people, to just say, well, I'm going to go about my day, but just potentially reduce some food, rather than I'm going to join the gym, I'm going to go work out, I'm going to take the time to drive there. But in reality, it's both that lead to the greatest potential weight loss. So we have to keep that in mind. Why we diet? Always and first and foremost is improved health. Some reasons why we also diet: we want to look and feel better. For some of us who may have the stigma and the pressures from media, the social stigmas of maybe being overweight or not feeling or looking a certain way, and pressure from our friends and families and people around us to look normal or to be more normalized. And unfortunately and fortunately, there is no definition of normal for human beings. We're all different. So it's really what gets us to be happier and healthier, rather than what gets us to be normal, because normal is always an ever-changing line, and it's always in the eye of the beholder. Body composition changes, enhanced performance, longevity in life and performance. And then, of course, why we diet, sometimes, unfortunately, it's financial reasons. Maybe we just don't have the money to afford specific foods. Spiritual, there are definitely religions out there and spiritual areas that fast and diet on specific foods at specific times. Economically driven reason why we diet, and of course environmental reasons. Sometimes we just can't get access to certain foods, and there may be some environmental disasters or emergencies as to why we're not able to intake specific nutrients at any given time. And of course, many, many other reasons. The obesity rates in America from 91 to 2010, and there'll be another chart coming up shortly if there already isn't one. But you can see in 1991, the top left, if you look across the bottom key, you'll see that the very light blue, less than 10% in each of those states were obese. And then if you look across where it's in the dark checkered red, greater than 30% of people in that state were obese. So if you look at 1991, very few states were even at 15 to 19% obese. The majority of them were 10 to 14%. Quite a few of them were less than 10, and then some states didn't even have any data. As we progressed into 1996, 5 years later, you can see that the number of states that went from 10 to 14 to 15 to 19 essentially doubled. And in some of those states, people, the percentage maybe even from 10 to 20% doubled. And each state seems to have data now at this point. 2003, 7 years later, now we're starting to creep into the 20 to 24, almost a fifth to a quarter of the state's population are declared obese, and now we actually have some states in the South, as you can see, are even at the 25 to 30%. And in 2010, one of the most recent ones, you can see now quite a few in the South and the southern region are in the greater than 30%. That means in each of those red states, greater than 30% of their population is declared obese. Florida right now in that 2010 category is in the next to highest category, 25 to 29%. And there's not a single state in blue anymore, not even in the dark blue. So on average, at the bare minimum, a fifth of each at the lowest end states is obese. And this is a hardship that we're taking on financially and physically and mentally. And this is something that is just going to consistently exceed and get worse and worse as time goes on until we actually make a decisive decision for ourselves to change our eating habits. Contributions to overweight and obesity. Of course, there's many, but a few here that we've all maybe have struggled through. Lack of energy balance, so too much energy in and not enough energy out throughout the day and over the long term. The chronic development of energy consumed, so calories consumed, energy consumed, has been greater than the energy actually used through working out, through exercise, through movement. Calorically dense foods greater than nutrient dense foods, and this has become more prevalent with fast food ever growing, fast food becoming cheaper and cheaper, and nutrient dense foods for some people being more expensive, with fruits and vegetables and in season where it's so much easier just to get a bag of potato chips or something through the drive-through, which can feed a family for very, very low cost of money. And also the flavors that are added that are just so high in calories and low nutrients have become a staple in our lives, unfortunately. And so that lack of energy balance just chronically over time has led to increased weight gain and decreased exercise and movement. Inactive lifestyle, more time in front of media and social media, TV, our cell phones, our iPads, tablets, and things like that. Job descriptions have changed. So 100 years ago, going from farming and walking to work when there were very few cars on the road, to now sitting behind a desk 8, 10, 12 hours a day in a cubicle, and then maybe moving just a few times to go to the bathroom and for lunch, where we sit down again for lunch. So we have moved from a very active moving lifestyle to an extremely inactive lifestyle, and most of that is with our jobs. No exercise and movement even after our jobs. Sometimes we're just too tired because we're sitting down so long that we don't have the energy. And also we have family obligations. And of course, advanced age. The older we get, the more our bodies just become a little bit more broken down, and we don't have the energy or the ability to even have a good exercise session. So this becomes an issue as well. Environment. This may be something that a lot of people don't think of, but lack of sidewalks has shown through some social studies that people get less exercise when they don't have the ability to actually walk around their own neighborhood. Neighborhoods that tend to have more exercises tend to have more people outside moving. Not necessarily saying that there's a causal effect of sidewalks to health, but there is more opportunity to actually get out and enjoy the area in a safe, secure location where people are walking and no cars are driving. So lack of sidewalks and lack of actual walking areas can be a major impact. Climate, of course, comparing Florida versus Wisconsin winters. In Florida, it's still in the 60s some days, so it's easy to get outside. In Wisconsin, in the northern states, it can be minus 20. So for those people, it's very difficult to get outside and do stuff, or to even go outside to inside. So that changes a lot. Changes a lot of people's ideals of their workouts. Sunlight. People tend to work out more when there's sunlight available, and access to healthy food choices. Some people just go through hardships, or some people don't have the close enough access to healthy food choices and options because of where they live. There's emotional and financial burdens and hardships. Sleep habits, that is a completely separate topic that we can spend an entire hour talking about, but more studies are coming out that reduced sleep quality and quantity have shown those people tend to have greater BMIs as compared to people who sleep more regularly and have better quality and quantity sleep tend to have lower BMIs. And of course, genes and family history. Total daily energy expenditures. We've gone over this before, but it's always good to remember that our total daily energy expenditure is the energy that we use throughout the day, moving, exercising, sitting, breathing, anything that requires us just to exist or move requires energy. So just regular resting metabolic rate accounts for 65 to 75% of our total daily energy expenditure. And essentially our resting metabolic rate is our metabolic rate at rest. What we would do if we were just to sit in a chair for 24 hours, do nothing except breathe, blink, and just be. And that rate is about 65 to 75% of the total daily energy expenditure. We have the physical activity energy expenditure, the PAE, which is 15 to approximately 30%. Those numbers, of course, vary. And that's when we're actually moving, our exercising, our walking to class, walking to work, walking to our car, getting up out of a chair. All of that's built in to that PAE. The thermic effect of food. So when we consume food, our resting energy rates go up. The amount of energy that requires to break down that food, chew that food, utilize that food, and convert it into energy through metabolism requires energy. So that raises the total daily energy expenditure as well. It's part of the whole system. If you look at the bottom at TEF, thermic effect of food, it's highest for protein, then carbohydrates, then fat. So if we want to boost our thermic effect of food and overall boost our total daily energy expenditure, which is a good thing, we want to see those numbers go up. Higher protein consumption as compared to carbohydrates and fat leads to a greater thermic effect of food and a greater total daily energy expenditure. Things that affect the resting metabolic rate are body surface area, so weight to height. Lean body mass, a greater lean body mass compared to fat mass means a greater resting metabolic rate because muscle is so much more metabolically active. It takes more energy to utilize and consume and rehab the muscle itself. Gender, men tend to have higher resting metabolic rates than women. Body temperature, thyroid hormone, age, younger people, of course, tend to have higher resting metabolic rates than older people. Calorie intake all accounts for the total daily energy expenditure as well. Pregnancy and use of caffeine and tobacco can all acutely affect total daily energy expenditure. So some of these things are good, some of these things are bad, but the overall idea is we want to increase our TDE, our total daily energy expenditure, by increasing our resting metabolic rate, the thermic effect of food, and the physical activity. So here's just a quick breakdown of exercise and maybe some things you've heard. So METs, metabolic equivalents, it's essentially the ratio, the rate of energy expended during any activity, that from just standing out of a chair, from sitting in a chair to running a marathon, to the rate of energy expended at rest. So if I'm just laying down compared to running a marathon and that rate of the rate of energy being used. The VO2, which is milliliters of oxygen per your body weight per minute that you can move or mobilize. So the amount of O2 your body can use during exercise is essentially what the VO2 looks like. There are numbers that equate to certain exercises, and it's never just a set 0 to 100 scale. The higher the VO2 number, the greater cardiovascular strength and endurance you have. So 1 MET, which is essentially meaning at rest, VO2 through numbers and through data and quantifiable data equals VO2 of 3.5 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram per minute. So again, 1 MET equals about 3.5 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram per minute, which is approximately 1.2 calories per minute. 1.2 to 1.5 roughly calories per minute. So if I was just sitting at rest, sitting here, doing nothing, not even speaking, not moving my hands, just sitting for 1 minute, I would burn approximately 1.2 to 1.5 calories per minute. It's not a lot. So if you're walking at a 3 mile an hour pace on a treadmill, you put the treadmill at 3, that's approximately a 3.5 MET. So that means if we multiply it out, if 1 MET equals 3.5 milliliters, then 3.5 is about 12.25 milliliters of oxygen. So then if you multiply that out, that's approximately 4.2 to 4.5 kcals per minute, approximately. Maybe even upwards up to 5 kcals per minute. So if you're walking at a 3 mile an hour pace, you can expect to utilize 4.5 roughly calories per minute. That's not a lot of calories per minute just from walking at a 3 mile an hour pace. So we have an example of a 70 kilogram man, walks for 40 minutes per day, 5 days a week at 5 METs. So the gross energy cost, 5 METs, and we said 1 MET is approximately 1.2 calories. If we multiply all this out, 5 METs times 1.2 calories times the 40 minutes that he does, he burns approximately 240 calories per walk in those 40 minutes. But he's also expending about 1.5 calories just standing and fidgeting. That's also known as non-exercise thermogenic activity of thermogenesis. So then we have to subtract that because his work doesn't include just the standing. So him actually walking is really only 240 minus 60, which is 180 calories. So we multiply that out times 5 days. He's really only using or burning 900 calories a week. Multiply that out times 4 weeks, 3,600 calories. We know that 1 pound of fat is approximately 3,600 calories. We've seen the data. We've seen some of the information about that. So if this person walks 5 times a day, 40 minutes a day at a 4-some minute pace or a 4 mile an hour pace, this person's only losing approximately 1 pound a month. That alone is useless. So all that work for that 1 pound meant nothing. So really the point is nutrition has to play a part of this, because if we want to see greater facilitated weight loss, we need to see better nutritional habits. We also need to see better body composition, and that comes from greater nutrient intake, better exercise modalities and training and intensity and volume. The results are going to depend, of course, on a combination of both exercise and nutrition. And we have to plan accordingly and put it in for the long run. This one, we didn't put the weight on in a day, and it's not going to come off in a day. So there's the time and then the execution of that through that length of time that is imperative. Some important concepts: calorie density versus nutrient density. We've talked about this before. We want to hit for the nutrient-dense foods. That's the ultimate goal, is because our cells want nutrient-dense foods. They want to know that they can be fed the essential micro and macronutrients in the shortest amount of time with the greatest ease of metabolism of those nutrients possible. So a potato compared to a bag of potato chips. The potato is going to be more nutrient dense and lower in calories. The bag of potato chips is going to be more calorically dense and lower in nutrients. One may taste better than the other, but what can we do with that more nutrient dense food to make it taste and be as enjoyable? And so that's what we want to focus on. More nutrient dense foods throughout the day to help us get to where we need to go. So there's a lot of diets out there. Could have made quite a few PowerPoint slides just to even name the diets, but we're going to talk about a few of them. Paleo, gluten-free, if it fits your macros, which is a relatively newer concept, very base concept, and then intermittent fasting. So the paleo diet, some people call it the caveman diet, the Paleolithic man diet, the original diet. It's really whatever you want to call it. The essential idea of the paleo diet is it's meant to reinforce theoretically what our ancestral human things would have eaten. The Neanderthals, thousands and thousands of years ago, before any of this technology, before any main agricultural advancements have been made, essentially hunter-gatherer times. So it's really hard for science to say, well, this is exactly what these people ate, because what our ancestors thousands of years ago ate in this area of the world was completely different than what our ancestors thousands of years ago ate in the European part of the world, or the African part of the world, or the Asian part of the world, because clearly we can see that there's disparities of food and choices across the world now, so there's no reason to believe that it wouldn't have happened before, and we have evidence that there was changes of food and different foods in different regions. So to say that that's what they ate back then, period, is really false, because we can't account for what every ancestor ate from every region back then. But nonetheless, this is the belief, and this is the ideas behind it. So you can see on the right the chart, the okay to eat, and this is not a complete list, but this is essentially the core values of paleo. Is fruits, vegetables, lean meats, seafood, nuts and seeds, and healthy fats. The avoidance group is dairy, because there's a belief that dairy with inflammation, and most people wouldn't have had cows, regular domesticated cows, to be drinking milk from, and cheeses probably wouldn't have been created accidentally. Grains, processed foods, and processed sugars, because of course there was no processing plants thousands of years ago. Legumes, starches, and alcohol. So looking at that just on the visceral level, fruits, vegetables, lean meats, seafoods, nuts and seeds, okay, all sounds pretty good. That's all good, healthy things to eat. But there are benefits to eating dairy. There are benefits to grains. There are benefits to legumes and starches. Wouldn't say there's any strong health benefit to alcohol. There may be some studies that have shown, with red wine and those kind of things. But in the long run, it's not going to hydrate you, and it's not going to provide you any necessary nutrients. And then processed foods and processed sugars. Not saying that we should dissolve them altogether in our meals, but reducing them may have some benefits. So just to say that these have to completely avoid may be very difficult for people, and there's research to show that a lot of these areas, dairy, grains, legumes, and starches, do have necessary nutrients that are required for us. It's essentially a type of a low-carb diet that does make a lot of restrictions compared to today's market of food. It can make it hard for people to enjoy the process of eating, because really what's eating besides just overall enjoyment? We like to chew, we like to swallow, we like to sip, we like the feeling of food, and we like the taste of food. There's a claim that you're going to be better, you'll be healthier, more fit, reduced risk of disease. And there have been some studies that have shown potential benefits, but nothing has been done in the long term yet. The theory is basically the high processed carb heavy eatings that we do, especially in our society, in American society, have been some of the biggest contributors. And that can be well documented that a higher carbohydrate diet without proper movement can lead to greater weight gain. Greater weight gain can lead to greater disease states, comorbidities. But just to say that this diet's the only way to go is not necessarily true. And the advocates for the paleo diet, we believe that we today should start eating the way and resume the way that humans did during the days of, again, the hunter and gatherers. So from Brian St. Pierre and at Precision Nutrition, his take on this is the Paleolithic time versus today time. Fruits were overall different. There's a lot of fruits that we eat today that probably didn't exist back then or were genetically modified since then. Produce has been selectively bred, just like vegetables and fruits, to get the best benefits out of them that make them appealing for us, that last longer, that taste better. So they wouldn't have had that ability back then. Thousands of cultivars, wild game, no domestication, just overall foods aren't the same. So to say we should eat like we're eating then, we would have to transport ourselves back in time to eat the foods that they ate. We're just not eating the foods that they ate back then. One big component of paleo is the people who do CrossFit workouts. And no, by no means are we saying CrossFit is good or bad. It's another modality for people to enjoy, but they've definitely taken that. There seems to be a strong relationship with people who do CrossFit and moving towards a more paleo style diet. The thing about with CrossFit and those type of really high energy workouts is they're high intensity for a relatively decent duration. Some of them can last 20, 30 minutes, and others can last even longer than that. And we know that we use carbohydrates predominantly in those short times for energy. And so if we're not consuming the proper amounts of carbohydrates and we're consuming more fats and proteins, we may not be getting the necessary macronutrient for energy use whenever we actually need them during these very high intense demanding workouts. We may see better body composition changes in the short term, but we don't know about the long term yet. There are definitely more studies that need to be done. So we know that carbohydrates fuel performance, especially within the first hour, 2 hours of a workout, even high intense workouts, even more so in high intense workouts because we use the glycogen to be used as glucose and then to be broken down for ATP. But to not supply our bodies with that necessary energy, then how are we getting that energy? Are we breaking down fat? Are we breaking down muscle protein? Are we utilizing the minimal amount of carbohydrates that we are intaking and hoping that we get the same results and effect through the workout? So there's a lot of give and take with this diet, and so it can be definitely strenuous for people to not take in that normal amount of carbohydrates for energy and then go through these demanding workouts. Here's a sample plan that you can read up on later. It'll be up on the slides. You can see just how this diet would be set for someone through U.S. News Health, regular 2,200 calorie diet. Some things it gets right and wrong. It does create an emphasis on healthy options like lean proteins, whole fruits and vegetables, raw edible nuts and seeds, which is something that should be advocated in most diets, depending on if you are eating, if you're an omnivore, eating just a regular diet without any massive restrictions. The diet can be more satiating because of the higher levels of protein and fat that's being consumed. There is potential effect for reducing the onset of certain diseases. I'm not saying there's any study that has found a causal relationship between paleo and disease states, but there have been some have shown decreased or reduced insulin secretion with increased insulin sensitivity, reduced LDL, and decreased blood pressure, which could in turn lead to just overall better health. An increased awareness of food production. A lot of people who follow the paleo diet do spend a lot of time looking at where their food is coming from or where it's being produced. So they are a little bit more informed as to what is going in their mouth, which is always a good thing. We should always know what we're eating, where it's coming from. What it potentially gets wrong, the basic exclusion of dairy and legumes and grains isn't necessarily true or necessary. There's more anecdotal studies or more anecdotal evidence than research-based evidence on that. Potentially miss a lot of the major macro or micronutrients like potassium, calcium, the B vitamins and D vitamin, which most of us are have insufficient levels of to begin with. There are no long-term studies to see any change in disease state, morbidities, weight loss maintenance, or any long-term effects on health. The argument of what the Paleolithic man ate is an evolutionary argument that right now has little merit. You can say that they ate differently, but how differently and what differently is a big question. The strict food rules are very difficult for a lot of people just getting into a strict dieting pattern. So it may be easier for people to fall off this bandwagon and not be able to get back on it as quickly. And it can be more expensive to always have to maintain that high level of protein. Protein, we know, tends to be the more expensive things that we purchase. So to constantly have to purchase higher levels of protein and fruits and vegetables can be a burden on our wallet sometimes. So we have another diet, gluten-free. This one definitely seems to be a outlier for some people. It's either the greatest diet in the world or you should never have to do this unless you have celiac or gluten intolerance. But nonetheless, it is a type of diet. It is a clinically referenced diet for people, especially with celiac disease or have a strong gluten intolerance. It has been popularized by quite a few actresses, singers, athletes, just overall health enthusiasts as being a cleaner, in quotes, way of eating. For those of you who just don't know, gluten is a protein found in wheat, barley, any of those derivatives. And celiac disease, it's an autoimmune attack on the intestinal GI tract lining, can be extreme GI distress with outcomes like massive diarrhea, sweating, fever, anything like that. With that extreme GI distress can also lead to malabsorption of necessary nutrients and minerals. And that can be an issue over the long term where we're not getting what we need because of these attacks on our intestinal lining. Advocates for the gluten-free diet, they claim it can help alleviate issues like ADHD, weight gain, help prevent the onset of diabetes, eczema, and those kind of things. But these are all just claims anecdotally. There hasn't been research to actually show that that a gluten-free diet does prevent ADHD or does prevent diabetes and such. But more studies, of course, are going to be needed. Here's a basic gluten-free meal plan. You can see it's not completely different from other plans. It doesn't seem to be that difficult to follow, but we just don't know that every time we open a package of food that it may have been processed or made or put together in a plant that also has gluten on its assembly line. So if you have a strong gluten intolerance and celiac, you probably follow this type of diet, or you abstain from gluten foods, or have different tools and areas of the kitchen where you abstain from having those gluten particles and proteins on your food, if it's severe enough. But for people who are just following this basic diet, it really looks relatively normal. You can just see certain things are missing. What it claims to get right, it does help treat celiac disease and gluten insensitivity and intolerance. This is something that there is no cure right now for celiac, so this is the front line a gluten-free diet, and it's an absolute necessity for people with celiac or a strong gluten sensitivity and tolerance. More food options as the diet becomes popular, so we're starting to see more and more foods that we've eaten as a kid now become gluten-free, have gluten-free options, gluten-free menu options at many restaurants throughout the nation. So it's definitely now becoming easy marketing tool to increase customer and clientele. Depending on the macronutrient intake, there could be some effect on weight loss because of the restrictions, because of the food choices. We just may naturally then be eating more nutrient dense, lower in calorie content foods, which could aid in the weight loss. It allows people to feel and believe that they are eating cleaner and healthier, and may delve into a little bit more of what they're eating and how they're eating. And there could potentially be diabetes prevention and diabetic control with this diet as well. More research, of course, is going to be needed on that. What it potentially gets wrong, there may not actually be any other benefit to this diet, strong benefits as compared to other diets, other than people with celiac or gluten intolerances. There is a very steep learning curve for people just getting into this because, one, some people don't know what gluten is, and two, they don't realize that gluten is in a lot of foods that we eat now. So to completely exhaust all those foods from our diet and remove them can be mentally frustrating and physically difficult for us as well, because it may remove a lot of the enjoyment of how we eat and what we like to eat, and have to immediately make a 180-degree change in how we eat. People with severe celiac and gluten intolerance, they can be susceptible to cross-contamination between foods. So that's why some people who have celiac or a strong gluten intolerance sometimes have their own separate toaster, their own separate microwave, their own separate cooking utensils and knives and forks. So there is no cross-contamination. If it fits your macros, some cute little memes there for you. So if it fits your macros, in the simplest of terms, it's basically a diet, and that revolves around your macronutrient needs and necessities. So proteins, fats, and carbs. It has been a controversial eating plan. It's more and more, it's been coming into light more and more recently, just in the last few years. Some people have seen great results on it. Other people have seen no results or worse results, massive gain weight, poor health. So it really just depends on the individual and where they were starting at to begin with. The basic idea behind it, and there is more in depth to it, but the basic idea is, as long as you set your macronutrient levels, so you can see total fat, total carbs, protein, it's set. The goal is, total fat, it says 85, you can see there. Total carbs, goal is 352. Protein goal is 96 for this particular person. As they plug in their food and they're putting in their macronutrients, it deducts it from the total, and then it'll give you how much you have left to eat throughout the day. So total fat, so far this person had 85 for the day. They've consumed 30, so they have 55 grams left throughout the day. However, they're going to space that out. And you can see the other nutrients, macronutrients, and sodium and cholesterol and fibers and sugars are in there as well. But it doesn't really state as to how you should eat, just more or less, can you fill these numbers appropriately? So some people take that in as to, well, I should then just go have fast food because I can easily meet these numbers with it, and then I can potentially lose weight. Potentially, but is it overall the most healthful choice? Probably not. And as your metabolic rate changes and as your weight changes, these numbers, of course, have to change. So this is always a changing dynamic as well. You have to know a lot of things. You should know your resting metabolic rate, the thermic effect of food, total daily energy expenditure. So it does require a little bit more at the beginning because you have to know what that goal number is so you can even just begin. Here's a classic, just basic meal plan on the left-hand side. And if you look to the right, if it fits your macros meal plan, you can see there are some discrepancies and changes as compared to the classic and the macro. Some people say the macros are better because it lets them have freedom of choice. But once you meet those nutrients, you're essentially done eating. So if you do it too early, there may be some fasting period. If you keep eating and you didn't meet the macronutrient level, you may have missed a lot of micronutrients as well at the same time. Or if you miscalculated your macronutrient needs, you may be overeating to begin with. If it fits your macros potentially gets right, it's a very simplified eating pattern. Plug in numbers, eat food, subtract from your total, and eat what you got left. There, of course, could potentially lead to weight loss and weight gain, depending on what your goal is. There is more freedom of food choices in here as compared to the other two diets we spoke about. A little bit more enjoyment of the food, considering you can have some more of the choices and freedom of choices. And you can plug these in with a lot of today's apps, and a lot of today's top rated apps and most popular apps kind of follow the if it fits your macros profile. Unfortunately, they may not take into account the micronutrient needs. So it does. Some of them say you need to get 100%. Of course, you should always try to strive for a good percentage of nutrients, but to evaluate every single food item, that's almost impossible for any app to do. And I don't think any app actually does evaluate every single food item. So that means you would have to plug in every single nutrient for every single food you eat. And not every food comes with a label, so you would have to do constant research on your food and know the constant amount of the food, the weight of the food, the volume of the food. No studies have been done on the if it fits your macros. It's all anecdotal. Limited barriers on food choices, so there is potential for overconsumption as we consistently change and develop our eating patterns and strategies. And for good tracking, sometimes you have to use apps and the tracking tools, and that can be expensive because sometimes you have to pay for these things. The last diet we'll talk about, intermittent fasting. It's a relatively newer one that's come out in the last few years. Some people have heard of it, some people haven't. There's more to this diet than what we're going to talk about today, but this is a general background and essentially an overgeneralization of the diet itself. So IF, as most diets are, they're touted as weight loss and fat mass loss aid. The difference between intermittent fasting and other diets is there are cycles between periods of eating and fasting rather than just dieting. So it's a little bit more extreme in the sense that there's times of no eating or extremely low caloric intake and times of normal eating as opposed to all day, just overall lower amounts of food or greater nutrient intake. So with intermittent fasting, it's more about the when you eat as compared to the what you should be eating. So intermittent fasting may lead, maybe through some studies that have been done, to hormonal changes that can facilitate weight loss and an increase in RMR, resting metabolic rate, acutely can occur. So if you can have an acute resting metabolic rate and constantly do that over the long term, that may lead to more caloric expenditure over the long term, which can facilitate that weight loss. The ultimate goal of IF is to eat fewer meals, which then means hopefully fewer calories, have that hormonal cellular changes which facilitate weight loss. There are many methods. We're going to go over 3 today of intermittent fasting. One is the 16-8 method. That basically means you eat for 8 hours, whatever those 8 hours are, and not consistently for 8 hours. If you do 2 meals in 8 hours, 3 meals, 5 meals, whatever that is, but you have 8 hours essentially to eat. Then you fast for 16 hours. It doesn't sound terrible considering some of us may actually be doing that now. If we get up at 7 to go to work, be at work by 8, 8:30, maybe we don't have breakfast, we just have a cup of coffee, eat maybe at 9. So really from 9 and then add 8 hours. So if we 9 to 12 is 3 plus another 5, maybe till 5. So, we're looking at between 9 to 5 p.m. that we're eating. And if we don't eat anything after that, we go to sleep, and then we don't eat anything for breakfast again. That may be kind of what some of us are doing right now, condensing our meals into an 8-hour period and then not eating any calorically dense food for 16 hours because half of that is from us sleeping. There may be some evidence to suggest women may only need to do a 14-hour fast or may do better with a 14-hour fast as compared to 16 hours. But drinking water, coffee, teas, non-caloric beverages can help stave off the hunger and are allowed in that fasting period. Some of the cons can be that difficulty of every day fasting for 16 hours. So, if you start eating at 9, you have to be done by 5. No snacks, no beer or wine, no quick midnight bites. Just nothing until the next day when you're already at work. So continuously do that can be difficult for people. In those 8 hours, we may not be getting enough calories or enough nutrients to even sustain the 24 hours in the day. So we may be under calorically eating, which can facilitate weight loss, but also can facilitate poor work and exercise performance. And having low levels of the micronutrients we need can disrupt our hormones, sleep patterns, just overall health. The 5-2 method, this one's a little bit more severe, in quotes. Eating normally for 5 days and then fasting for 2 whole days. So this may not be an actually true restriction of fasting for 2 days. In the 5-2 method, the 2-day fasting can be restricted to only 500 calories a day for women and 600 calories a day for men. So there is some food consumption, but it's just a very low caloric intake at that point. So an example would be eating normally, and let's just say Friday through Tuesday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. 5 days, you eat normal, eat what you want, any times you want, as if it was any given day you weren't on this diet. Then you would fast Wednesday and Thursday. So that means women would consume approximately 500 calories a day on Wednesday and Thursday, and men would consume approximately 600 calories a day on Wednesday and Thursday. So if you're going from a 2,000, 3,000 calorie diet to a 500 calorie diet, that can be very disruptive and mentally and physically exhausting as well. If those 2 days just happen to coincide with 2 busy work days, travel, heavy workouts, family, there's a lot of factors that play into it, and it's hard to always change those 2 days because then that disrupts the 5-2 method to begin with. There is no study with the 5-2 diet, so it's all anecdotal at this point. And that also means in those fasting days, there may be very low nutrient-dense foods being consumed because we may be starving ourselves so much that we want those quick calorically dense foods, which tend to be higher in fat, salt, and sugar, just to kind of ease that burden of having such low calories in us to begin with. So this can be a dramatic change for people as well. The eat, stop, eat method, basically a complete 24-hour fast, and then you do that once or twice a week. So eat, 24-hour fast, eat, then do it again. Eat, 24-hour fast, eat. So eat, stop, eat, stop, eat, stop, eat. And just completely doing that. So that's basically fasting for a complete 24 hours. So we went from a 16-hour fast, which half of that was sleep anyways. Then we went to a 2-day fast, but it was just very low calorie. It was just more of a heavy restrictive 2 days, to now a complete 24-hour fast, a true fast, where only water, coffee, teas, and other non-caloric beverages can be consumed. So we can eat in a day, fast, completely fast, and just drink non-caloric beverages, and then eat again. This may be the most grueling for some people. The goal is to eat normally during those eating periods, so the eat times, and then to completely fast for those stop days. Some people cannot do it immediately into the eat stop eat, so some people suggest starting with the 16-8 method and then slowly moving to 16-8, then maybe 20-4, then 22-2, and then finally going into a 24-hour period of complete fast over the course of weeks to get used to it. The cons are the same with the other methods. All the variables in life, work, business, exercise, the micronutrient and macronutrient intake, the cravings for specific foods that may actually offset the reason for these diets to begin with. So these are things to play around with and consider. Some people do really well with these diets, some people don't, but it's another option. And of course, the warrior method. And this is the one that has been touted through some athletes. Eating a small amount of whole fruits, raw fruits, and vegetables throughout the day, and non-caloric beverages throughout the day, and then only eating one huge meal at the end of the night. And this would be done every day. So throughout the day, raw, small amounts of fruits and veggies, no syrups, no dressings, nothing like that. Non-caloric beverages, teas, coffees, water, and the like. And then working out, and then having one huge meal at the end of the night. Fast all day, feast all night, or feast at night, I should say. This can be similar actually to the paleo diet, depending on how you're eating, if you're looking at the raw foods, the whole foods in that sense. But it's certainly more restrictive on the timing measures. Where paleo doesn't really have a timing consideration, this one does. And even potentially more cons with this type of diet than others. Intermittent fasting, some studies revealed, if you go to Authority Nutrition, you can actually look up the studies that they cite for these revelations. But weight loss, insulin resistance, some studies showed intermittent fasting can reduce insulin resistance, lowering blood sugar by 3 to 6%, and the fasting insulin up to 20 to 31%. Inflammation, reduction in inflammation, and improving heart health. So looking at all these diets and then actually picking what we can actually take away from just the base level of these diets, it's really any diet that restricts caloric intake over the long term should lead to weight loss, assuming that it's a healthy individual and you've given that diet enough time and you've applied all the other necessities, proper exercise routine, proper sleep habits, just normalizing your day so that the reduced caloric intake is essentially the only major variable. Healthy, nutrient-dense food choices with exercise have the greatest impact on body composition, so greatest impact on increased lean body mass and decreased fat mass. All the diets that we presented basically state the same concepts. They each have their own individuality, but if you just break it down to what they're saying, they all state eat real food. Try to slowly remove large amounts of the processed food. Processed food can be good, but look at the more nutrient-dense, whole nourishing, real foods. Eat more healthful, nutrient-dense foods, they all tout. Restrict either the amount of food, the time of consumption, or both. Don't substitute healthier food choices for nutrient-deficient food choices. So they're not saying if you have this opportunity of this nice nutrient-dense, high-protein salad, don't go for the big greasy cheeseburger instead. Each diet says the more nutrient-dense foods is the better choice. Some just give you more leeway with others. They all state, if you do more research about adequate hydration and making sure you're drinking water and non-caloric beverages throughout the day, and diversifying your options of food choices based on their limitations and restrictions. So if we just look at that, what if we just followed those basic guidelines to begin with? Eating more healthy, nutrient-dense foods, exercising more regularly, restricting limited restrictions, small restrictions at first, and then we can change and develop them as we become more accustomed to the food, the time, or both. Eating more nutrient dense foods as compared to deficient foods, drinking more water throughout the day. These are all things that we can do right now that don't really apply to any one diet. It's all of the diets just combined to make an easy go-to goal. So there may not be a diet that you have to follow. It just may be these guidelines that you have to follow consistently and for a long period of time. Many of today's diet plans do have limitations. The restricted food choices, the change in RMR, a positive change or a negative change that can change exercise habits. The micro and macronutrient ratio consumption, those can definitely change if you're fasting, if you're feeding heavy, if you're restricting foods. Expensive or hard to access foods, depending on where you live, your financial situation. Most of these diets are set for you. They're not set for you and how to compensate for your family and your work and your peers and all that. So you have to take all of that into account. Some of these diets don't take into account emotional levels of how people feel emotionally about the food, the religious aspects of food, the physical attributes that people have or people go through throughout the day, and the food may not be beneficial to their physical activity. It just may be overall mentally difficult to actually start the diet or continue with the same restrictive pattern. Some research has shown that when a specific restrictive diet is stopped in an abrupt fashion, or people fall off the bandwagon, that there may be an actual increase in weight from that initial starting weight. So they may actually gain more weight than what they previously started with. Unfortunately, there is little data and scientific research on efficacy on a lot of these diets and the health benefits as well. And a lot of them are just showing acute short-term results versus the chronic, which is what we want to see, because we want to live for a long time, not live for a short time. So again, which diet is the best? It's what I just said, those main points. It's more nutrient-dense foods. It's diets it's a food pattern and food lifestyle changes that we can go through a long time. It's meeting the essential levels of the nutrients, the macros and the micros, so we can fuel the body, fuel the cells, fuel our hormonal changes and necessities. It's controlling the energy balance. So if we're trying to lose weight, more energy out as compared to in. It's outcome-based. We see research. We can look at it, how it's been done, how it's been reviewed, and there's a reason behind why we're dieting, rather than, oh, because I have to. What's the overall outcome of this diet? What are we looking for? And does this diet fit with my goals? And it's sustainable. Financially sustainable, geographically, economically, socially, religiously, spiritually, personally sustainable to you. So again, there may not be a diet, but there's certainly goals that each of these diets hits on that may be beneficial to all of you. And I suggest you all take a look at some of those main key points that we stated previously on the previous slides as to what are the small things that I can do right now to make those necessary changes. So goals to achieve: protein intake, looking at approximately 1.7 grams per kilogram. If you do the math, more research has shown higher levels of protein intake have been shown to increase satiety. Protein has a greater satiating effect, just like we said in the earlier slides. It helps reduce or helps increase fullness, and helps you feel fuller longer. Protein helps preserve and increase muscle mass during reduced caloric intake. So if we're on a restrictive diet, increasing our protein levels can help maintain that muscle mass while we lose weight as well. Can increase the TEF, thermic effect of food, which then helps relate to increased resting metabolic rate. With that, we also want to make sure we're maintaining adequate carbohydrates for performance, and because carbohydrates do contain micronutrients that we need, and maintaining enough fat for proper energy metabolism and micronutrient absorption. Hydrate throughout the day as often as best as possible. Water, coffee, teas, and non-caloric beverages. Even consider, if it's water, sometimes it's very difficult for people. They just don't like the taste of water. So consider getting maybe a diffuser, something that you can easily put fruits and vegetables into the water to create a flavor and to have some of those nutrients leach into the water as well for you to drink. Self-identification if you're well hydrated. Unless you have equipment at home that you can check the specific gravity of your urine, what you want to look for is light lemonade color. If it's too dark, you're dehydrated. If it's too clear, you're overhydrated, which means you're probably going to go to the bathroom a lot more and more. Light lemonade color is the goal. Water helps move lymph through the system, helps regulate our body temperature, and helps fills the stomach as well. So helps with the immune system, regulating the immune system, helps with core body temperature, and helps us feel satiated as well. Many other benefits to water. We can do a whole talk on it. And varying exercise intensity, volume, duration, and modalities. So with nutrition, you have to also do the exercise. Recent studies, like the PRIZE study that was done by Dr. Paul Arciero, interval training, resistance training, stretching yoga, a multitude of these modalities, and partaking in all of them had a great impact on decreased fat mass with increased lean mass and cellular and metabolic benefits. So if you want more information, you should really consider looking at the PRIZE study that was done. PRIZE stands for protein, resistance training, interval training, stretching, yoga, and endurance training. So that is it for this talk. I went over a little bit, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. If you have any questions, please send them to BodyTrack, and we'll be glad to answer them as best as possible. Again, for those of you who are partaking in the 90-day challenge, I hope some of this information was beneficial and you put some of the true information and research-based evidence into your practices throughout the day. And even the smallest little thing can make a huge benefit. So if you have any questions, send it out to us. We'll answer them, and we'll see you next time.